Have you ever read a poem that was just so incredibly vivid, it literally transported you to a completely different place? That's the absolute magic of poetry. Welcome to this step-by-step explainer. Today, we're going on a really fun creative journey to capture some of that magic for ourselves. We're actually going to treat writing like a culinary art. Think of it as a creative recipe. By the end of this lesson, you'll know exactly how to blend the super strict, elegant structure of Japanese poetry with the rich, bold flavors of Filipino culture to create a totally original masterpiece of your very own.
So a huge welcome to all you focused learners out there. Here's our recipe, or syllabus, for success today. First, we'll explore Filipino cultural elements. Then, we'll break down the classic haiku structure. After that, we add our Filipino twist. Then comes peer review and polishing, and finally, publishing your original poem. Let's just dive right in.
All right, starting off with exploring those Filipino cultural elements.
Think of this step as gathering the raw materials, or the core ingredients for our poetry recipe. You know, just like a really amazing dish needs distinct flavors, a great cultural poem needs very specific, authentic details to actually bring it to life. So let's take a quick inventory here. We essentially have four main categories you can draw from. Under traditions, you've got vibrant celebrations, like the Sinulog Festival, or even just everyday customs. Then there's beliefs, which covers religious practices and indigenous spirituality, like the reverence for the Santo Niño. Next is folklore. This is where we find these incredibly rich myths and legends, which are just perfect for poetry. Think of the tales of Maria Makiling or the legendary Sarimanak bird. And finally, symbolism. This involves objects that carry deep, deep cultural meaning, like the fragrant sampaguita flower. Basically, any of these can act as the main flavor profile for your poem.
But here's the really fascinating part. Your ingredients don't have to be loud or massive to be powerful. Simple, everyday traditions can completely anchor your writing. Take Pagmamano, for instance. It's not a grand, sprawling festival, right? It's a quiet, beautiful hand-kissing gesture that shows deep reverence for elders. When you drop a specific detail like this into your writing, you're doing way more than just describing an action. You're instantly communicating this core, authentic Filipino value about family and respect.
Okay, now that we've got our ingredients prepped, let's look at the classic haiku structure.
We really need to take our time here and understand the measurements of our recipe. This is our foundational blueprint. So what exactly is it? Well, a haiku is an unrhymed Japanese poetic form, but its true genius is actually in its limitation. The whole thing consists of exactly 17 syllables, and they are arranged across just 3 lines. That's it. The entire goal here is to express a massive amount of emotion or paint a really vivid picture in the absolute fewest words possible. It literally forces you, the writer, to distill your thoughts down to their absolute purest essence.
And the absolute most crucial rule, the one you absolutely have to master before writing a single word, is the syllable count. 5, 7, 5. I actually want you to count along with me in your head, or, hey, even count on your fingers, whatever works. You get exactly 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second, and 5 in the third. It sounds incredibly restrictive, I know, but as you'll see in a minute, that tight constraint is exactly what makes this poetry style hit so hard.
All right, let's get to the really fun part, adding a Filipino twist.
We've got our cultural ingredients, and we've got our 575 structural blueprint. Now we mix them together to cook up something totally unique. Let's look at a gorgeous example of infusing this traditional Japanese form with Filipino imagery. I'm going to read this slowly, and I want you to picture the landscape while we check the rhythm. Line 1, rice terraces rise. Okay, that's 5 syllables. Line 2, emerald steps to heaven's gate. Spot on, that's 7. Line 3, ancestors watch. Wait a second. Ancestors watch. That's only 4 syllables. Actually, let's fix that right now on the fly. If we change it to our ancestors watch, boom, we hit our 5 syllables perfectly. But syllable math aside, just look at how this beautifully weaves in the Hagdan Palayan, the famous rice terraces, alongside the animistic beliefs of honoring ancestors. It paints this massive, breathtaking cultural landscape using almost no words at all.
And it doesn't have to be a giant landscape either. This next one brilliantly shows how everyday food traditions can be just as emotionally powerful. This poem is literally just about eating lugao sa umaga, or breakfast porridge. Listen to this. Steaming white comfort. You can almost smell the hot rice, right? Manga on the side, a sweet start. You instantly get that visual pop of the bright yellow mango. Spoon warms the soul too. By focusing on this incredibly simple, traditional comfort food, the writer creates this vivid, sensory experience that just feels exactly like home.
So you've written your poem. Now what?
Well, it's time for peer review and polishing.
Because, let's face it, every great recipe needs a taste test before it goes on the menu. In writing, this quality control step is our peer review. It's how we take a rough draft and polish it into a gemstone. Let's walk through this grading criteria, because this rubric is going to empower you to be a super constructive critic for your classmates. First up, the absolute foundation. Is the syllable structure strictly 575? If not, it needs a tweak. Next, imagery. Does it paint a clear, sensory picture? Then we have the season word. It's optional, but referencing something like summer through mangoes can be really impactful. Most importantly for this lesson, check those cultural elements. Are the traditions or symbols integrated respectfully and accurately? And finally, consider the emotional impact, the originality, and just the overall clarity and flow. Using this rubric isn't about tearing a poem down, it's about helping your peers elevate their art. And once that peer review is done and your poem is polished to perfection, we hit the final stage, publishing your original poem.
Your masterpiece is finally ready to come out of the kitchen and be served to the world. But how do you actually distribute it? Let's weigh a couple of very different publication avenues side by side to see what might work best for you. On one hand, you have the school literary magazine. This is fantastic for community recognition, and you get direct support from your teachers. But the trade-off is you'll have to deal with strict submission guidelines and pretty rigid deadlines. On the flip side, we have social media platforms. These offer a massive, immediate reach and instant engagement with a much broader audience. However, that definitely comes with privacy risks, so you really have to prioritize safety considerations. Honestly, the right choice just depends entirely on your personal goals and your own comfort level.
But whichever path you do end up choosing, there are a few final steps that are absolutely non-negotiable. First, choose that platform carefully. If you're posting online, you have to double-check those platform-specific privacy settings. Being responsible online is a big deal. You might even want to consider using a creative pen name just to protect your identity. And please, above all else, do one absolute final proofread for spelling or grammar errors before you hit submit. A single typo can completely break the beautiful spell your haiku is trying to cast. Oh, and be prepared to share the cultural context of your poem too. Remember, some of your readers might be experiencing these beautiful Filipino traditions for the very first time.
So, what Filipino cultural element are you most excited to share with the world? We've gone through the whole recipe today. We gathered our rich cultural ingredients, the traditions, the folklore, the symbols. We measured them out using that super strict 575 haiku structure. We talked about polishing them up through peer review and getting them ready for the world to see. Because when you combine authentic culture with elegant structure, it truly equals a masterpiece. So, I want you to think about your own heritage, your own community. What unique, beautiful piece of Filipino culture do you want to highlight? Grab a pen, start counting out those syllables, and get to writing. I seriously cannot wait to see what you all create.